A Japanese superhero wins an AI copyright case in China?
In a Shanghai courtroom, a Japanese superhero won a copyright battle against AI. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, that same AI could legally devour everything in sight. This isn't just about Ultraman. It's about your work becoming someone else's fuel, and Japan is showing us how it happens.
Hey, I'm Declan Dunn, and this is the AI Optimist. We're talking about AI eats copyright to look at a model in Japan which is taking in all copyrightable content in the country is allowed to be taken into AI. And what comes out or any impacts is left up to the courts. There's ways to do it. I'm going to go in and show you why Ultraman, one of the biggest characters in Japan, stood up in China and was awarded a copyright violation, and the weird contradiction where Japan allows it to go in there and China says no this time, but with a reason that's really interesting. In Tokyo, right now, AI systems are feasting on copyrightable content within Japan. No permission and no payments, though we're going to get to that a little later. It's actually a decent model. See, for the last few months, I've been focusing on copyright, and engineers have stood up and said, hey, why don't you recognize our case that why we should put copyrightable content in? And I found that the country of Japan, their AI model is run on putting AI copyrightable content into it. That manga you created, that's comics and cartoons. That's legal training data. That song you recorded, fair game for AI. But it's not that simple. There are boundaries and rules around this allowing access to copyrightable content to learn, as long as it doesn't do it to really replicate, to copy it, or to challenge somebody financially. We're going to look into what Japan's doing, their AI model, and what it could teach our creators and our own approach to AI. So how does Japan's Ultraman get copyright protection in China? So if you don't know who Ultraman is, let me jump you into the story of China and how this compares to how AI's model in Japan is run. Because Ultraman is a very, very famous comic cartoon that came out in 1966 originally as Ultra Q. And I'm showing you, if you're looking on the video, an image of Ultra Q, the original one, who looks an awful lot like Godzilla. So let's not get into copying things, but it certainly is a Japanese monster look of the mid-60s, and it evolved to what you're seeing now. These are the Ultraman looks that came up for the case in China. So here's how it worked. It brought Ultraman a copyright violation. There's a company inside China called SCLA, a Shanghai company that owns the licensing rights to Ultraman in China, and I believe they're the exclusive rights. So they found when they went to one of these sites that they were able to enter in Ultraman Dyna, D-Y-N-A, which is one of the types of Ultraman. There's all sorts of characters over the years. That put out what you see in front of you that looks a lot like Ultraman, enough for that Chinese court to say, yes, that's a violation. So what they did was understood the context of the suit was the license owner, in this case, who licensed it from the Japan company, right? So this is all in China. And the output is the copyright violation. But the licensing company that was sued the company's website where the output happened, where somebody entered a prompt, Ultraman Dyna, and out came that image. Now, if you know AI, you'd say, oh, wait, that may be from that site or it may be outside. For example, a lot of people use ChatGPT and they call it a wrapper, an API wrapper. So this site might have been running it, and let's just say ChatGPT, for whatever name of that model there is being pulled into the site to bring the intelligence and to bring the Ultraman figure in their data, in their intelligence. And nowhere in this lawsuit was that actually taken down. In fact, the company that was suing chose the website. So creators, listen up. This is a great tip. They chose the website. The website didn't actually own the content, the AI training that was coming out. That was from a third party. They licensed that. And this is so common. It's rare that people actually create their own AI. Most often you'll see sites that are what are called wrappers. So by doing this, they were able to stop that one violation, and it was a small fine of like $1,400 US. but they weren't able to go backwards, even though the judge did note that there is a network requirement in Chinese law looking at AI and things that come over the internet. But that wasn't brought up because the person who brought the suit did not bring up the AI company providing the information that would have removed that from an ability to recreate it again. So they stopped the copyright violation, but they didn't because it's still in the data. Do AI tools really need artists? We asked this in a sort of debate scenario with Notebook LLM to get a little AI point of view before we jump into what we're exploring with a Japanese AI model. Take a listen.
So let's try to untangle this a little bit. The first point of contention that really jumped out at me from the sources was about whether artist collaboration actually makes AI tools more commercially successful.
Right.
I mean, does working with creators actually lead to a better product? Or are the people advocating for scraping right when they say that licensing fees just stifle innovation?
I think this is where the real-world examples become really fascinating. So proponents of artist collaboration, they often point to successes like Adobe Firefly. It's trained on licensed stock images, and designers seem to really love it.
Right.
There are also projects like Sony's Flow Machines, and this was one where AI actually assisted artists in songwriting, which kind of helped them to sidestep those legal headaches. And there's also the Google projects, Deep Dream and Magenta, which are interesting because they really focus on AI as a tool that fits within existing creative workflows, so not as a replacement for artists.
Right, so it's more about AI enhancing creativity rather than replicating it entirely. But what about the arguments for letting AI learn from everything out there? Like, what are the potential benefits of that? Why do people think that's a good idea?
Well, those who advocate for open access make the case that forcing these AI companies to pay for training data could basically create a scenario where only the biggest tech companies, the ones with the deepest pockets, can afford to play.
Right, makes sense.
And they point to Japan, which has that wide open approach to AI training data, as a possible model for really rapid AI development. And their argument is that machine learning, it doesn't actually copy, it extracts patterns. So therefore, copyright concerns become kind of less relevant.
So they're saying it's like AI is learning in the same way a human artist draws inspiration from the world around them.
Exactly, yeah. And they even go so far as to say, why should creators have a monopoly over knowledge? They argue that copyright wasn't really designed to limit learning. And AI training, at its core, is a form of learning.
Your work might be protected in one country and free-for-all training data in another. This isn't about stopping AI. It's about understanding who benefits when copyright becomes optional.
Well, there are two parts of Japan's copyright law that's interesting. I have links if you're on Substack or YouTube that you can follow up later. Japan looks at this as allowing copyrightable content to train so it can learn, as long as those learnings don't turn into basically copying somebody else's content. But that's not the intent here, nor does that seem how Japan's copyright law takes a look at this. They have two requirements that are interesting. One is called the non-enjoyment purpose requirement. And what that means is if you bring content that's copyrightable in, your intention is not to recreate the same thing. You're not bringing in a Van Gogh painting to create a Van Gogh painting. You're bringing it in to learn and to add to your responses outside of just that painting. And while that's easy to say, it's really hard for creators to understand the difference. Which is why Japan has a thing called Article 30-4 Proviso. That's a mouthful, but what it does is it protects creators, individual creators' rights, that if there is a copyright violation, if somebody actually tries to take it, and not just take it, but actually turn it into something that would hurt their career, hurt their reputation, hurt their financial status, if it causes an impact, that's when the normal rules apply. So they're saying let us train it because the input's okay. And this is what engineers have told me again and again in the US. That's not a copyright violation. Well, I'm not sure Japan agrees. What both sides, US and Japan, agree on is that what comes out, if that looks like what went in, then that is a copyright violation. And as we all know, except in rare cases like Ultraman, that's super rare. And that might be the way this model works out in the US, though there are things happening that we learned about in our last week's episode that might shake that up. So what we're talking about from a US perspective is what's called fair use. But fair use is not a rule in copyright. Fair use is a defense in legal court. So in Japan, they don't have the fair use defense. They have their own defenses. See, in Japan, they don't have fair use. They have the non-enjoyment purpose requirement that the AI was not taking it in with the intention of creating the exact same thing or something similar. It was taking it in to learn. This is where the boundary is between learning, and that is what US companies call in the US defense, used by ChatGPT and many others, as fair use. That we're researchers, we're learning, we're training. We don't plan to put out that data, and if we did, just like Japan, we would handle it. But we need to bring all that data in because there's so much of it that no human could afford to pay for it. It's beyond what used to exist. Now, it would have been nice if they asked permission first. And that is where you get into a lot of trouble, where move fast and break things is the motto of Silicon Valley. If you're breaking copyright and you think it's just something you can break, that's what we're looking at and why I'm so focused in 2025 in the US on copyright. I need your feedback because at the end of the year, the US AI copyright findings should be decided upon. And this will determine everything. Well, I hardly think we're going to blow it all up. I think if you look at the Japanese model, these are the seeds of what the US model will look a little bit like.
Their argument is that these AI models that are trained on these massive data sets of copyrighted work could potentially flood the market with all this AI-generated content.
Okay.
And that content would directly compete with the original works that the AI was trained on and potentially even replace them altogether.
So they're saying that AI-generated content could devalue human-created works and actually lead to economic harm for artists and creators.
Exactly. And they believe that this type of market harm could actually give grounds for lawsuits from publishers and artists and all sorts of creators.
Right.
The argument is that AI should enhance and support human creativity, not replace it entirely.
But how does the pro-scraping side address this whole issue of market harm? What's their counter-argument?
Well, their take is basically that the market will adapt, as it always has with new technologies.
Okay.
They point to historical examples like the printing press, radio, the internet,
Right.
all of which, initially disrupted creative industries, but ultimately led to new forms of creativity and new markets.
So they're saying we need to embrace this disruptive potential of AI and find ways to adapt rather than clinging to old models.
Exactly. And they believe that artists and musicians will find new ways to monetize AI, perhaps through, endorsements or collaborations, or even using AI as a tool to enhance their own creative processes.
Right. So instead of viewing it as a threat, they see it as an opportunity for creative evolution.
Precisely.
It's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
They also argue that trying to restrict AI training data would be like trying to hold back the tide, right?
Yeah. They think it would be totally futile and actually benefit big corporations more than individual creators.
Okay.
They argue that in the context of AI, copyright has basically become this artificial barrier to progress. That it's stifling innovation by clinging to these outdated models of creativity and ownership.
I'm amazed the Copyright Office just didn't say all AI copyrightable content is suitable for training, but by leaving it open, we have to wait a year. And I just can't imagine they're going to crush ChatGPT, Claude, and the whole AI industry with a finding against it. So what will it look like? Well, my guess is that there might be levels of human AI input that they're going to start looking at. So like minimal input, you put a prompt in or two, it doesn't go. And they're already saying that in legal cases in Japan, in China. They're saying that if you actually do more prompting, it shows a little bit, but prompts alone just don't prove human original creation. You need to show that you've done things over and over, iterative, just like software. You're creating, you're editing, you're drafting, showing an effort that you're not just putting it in, coming out and saying that this is original work because they don't want to be overloaded with 10 million AI images. But where are the lines we draw? This is what we need to say to the AI models going forward. Is there selection like curating? Curating is going to be a big thing with AI because putting together images, assembling a story or a publication, you can get a copyright for and protect yourself and maybe turn it into something that you make a living off of rather than something that is otherwise out in the public domain that anyone can use. Concept, direction. Those two things have to be shown. So if you creators out there are doing things, you've got to show this now in your own work, because the big question will come, especially in digital art. Did you use AI to do it? Because a lot of our tools really can't tell. If you're creating something, what do you do that, number one, shows control and intent, shows that you have an idea of what you're looking for, or at least try to direct the picture to its ultimate goal, or the writing, that you have something on the end that you're looking for. Otherwise, it is a roulette wheel. Creative choice. Show where you made those creative choices, whether that was choosing a platform, whether that was choosing and curating between different AI images. Were there colors? Were there angles? Were there filters you used? And you need to show a lot more than where you press buttons. I noticed that in the US copyright, they kept looking at the fact that this was just done by AI, that it wasn't created by the person doing it. And the more they asked, it was really hard to discern unless they left AI and did a little bit more tweaking and updating of the image, like Jason Allen's famous image, Teatro de Opera Spatial. Hey, just like the Chinese court, there's no easy answers. While that Chinese court in the Ultraman case found for the licensed owner, it was a little fine, and it really didn't stop the problem, not because the court was wrong, but because the person providing the information didn't think that beyond the person's site they were at was actually the technology where that brand copyright violation must have happened. And so this could happen again and again. That kind of approach is going to be very common because we don't really understand. It's complex for most of you listening to even understand what I just said, because you'll go to a site and think it's running the AI, and it's just paying a monthly fee to run what's called an API to connect the information to their site and make it appear that they're showing the intelligence when they're actually using the intelligence from another third-party software. So be aware, and more aware if you're a content creator, that the copyright offices are savvy and know this, and that if you do need to stand up, you really need to make sure that if you're going after it, know where your data is. Don't just assume that you're going to shut it down like they did in China and that solves anything. Until they take it off, that's problem still not solved. And even when they take it off, I'm not even sure how they solve that problem. So do AI tools really need artists? Well, you could say for the case of collaborative works between users and the software, definitely yes. I've never seen a software platform that doesn't encourage feedback from its users, even doing that at a major level. Look at Midjourney, constantly saying, hey, you can create your own mood boards to give us a style. You can actually pick the pictures you've created. And I'm not even close to being good on Midjourney, but it ups my game so much by providing these tools that are smarter than I am as sort of a novice graphic designer who use it mostly to decorate my videos and as B-roll. That kind of collaboration, asking me, going back, Opus Clip is another one I use, constantly asking me not only to review, but setting up calls, getting qualitative direct information. This is where the AI gets really, really good. So as much as we want to keep ours separate, and we made this copyright a line in the sand, it's really the line that can bring us together and figure out what we're going to do with this next. Because no matter what, it's going to happen, and there's no way to unwind it. And this week, I'm looking to see if Japan has a really good experiment going on. While it's too early to tell if all of this is going to change the world like anything AI, it's a pretty smart and wise approach to AI allowing copyrightable content for training, saying that the culture, the community, is as important as the individual's rights, as long as what's taken in doesn't impact, especially commercially, financially, revenue, making money. If that gets hit anywhere in the world, that's gonna be stopped. Hey, can you actually take it out of ChatGPT once you put it in? I don't think so, but courts are trying to handle this messy and pretty much unanswerable question.